Good morning, everyone. Today is July 2nd, 2020. On June 29th, 1970, the Lutheran Church in America, as they gathered in assembly, voted to change the word man to person in the requirements for ordination into word and sacrament ministry. This one word change may seem insignificant, but it was not, because it opened the door for women to be ordained in our church. It would be 6 months later in November that Elizabeth Platts would be ordained, the first woman. And when I heard her tell her story last year, her back and forth about whether or not to be a pastor, the stories of people who encouraged her along the way, her trepidation at being the first, there was part of me that resonated with her story, and yet another part of me that could have no idea what that was like for her. To have no female role models, to be the role model and the example. Many of what we call the first wave of women who were ordained faced a church not quite ready to have a female leading them in spiritual manners. Many of my contemporaries say the same thing. And while we are more apt as a church to call women to be our pastors than we were in those early days, there are still those who would rather have a male or real pastor. It would be 22 years before the first female bishop was elected in a tiny synod in Wisconsin along the Mississippi. That's right. Our La Crosse area synod was the first synod to elect a female bishop, April Erling Larson. I remember being at the Women of the ELCA Triennial and hearing her speak not long after she was elected. I was in awe of this woman who was now a bishop. I was totally starstruck when she called me on the phone to let me know that I had been assigned to the La Crosse area synod. And I am deeply grateful for her guidance and her wisdom and her colleagueship throughout the years. I remember being at the churchwide assembly as a visitor in 2009 after the church voted to allow people of same-gendered relationships to serve. And Bishop Larson was there too as a visitor, and she walked up to me and we shared a big hug, and she said, "Isn't this amazing?" She knew what would face our siblings in the LGBTQIA community in the years to come, but she also knew what a great gift they had been and would be to our church. And in that moment, woman to woman, we celebrated. Bishop Larson has shaped the way we are a synod, and she brought all her talents to bear to the work. But she was the only female bishop for a very long time. It's only been in recent years that we've seen the number of women in the position of bishop grow. It would be 21 years after Bishop Larson was elected that the first female presiding bishop of the ELCA would be elected, Bishop Elizabeth Eaton. Like the other firsts before her, Bishop Eaton has boldly gone where no man has gone before, with grace and wisdom and humor and deep faith in Jesus. She has led this church well as we face tough conversations and new ways of thinking about and being church. I was born 13 months after that historic vote. And so it is true that in my lifetime, it has always been possible for a woman to be ordained into the ministry of word and sacrament. And yet I was 18 before I saw my first female pastor, and it was so weird. I had no idea that such a thing was possible. I had only known men as my pastors, and boys were the only ones encouraged to be pastors. It never occurred to me that women could and should be pastors. It would be another 7 years before I would be able to open myself up to the calling God placed on my life really early on. I am so deeply grateful for all the women who paved the way for me and for so many like me. The women who waited for years for a call, who fought to be treated like equals and to be spoken to with respect. The women who faithfully served even if they were paid less than their male counterparts. The women who preached the gospel like that first woman at the tomb, with a depth of faith that could not be denied, even though it was. The women who continue to lead with boldness, using their full selves to bring the gospel to the hurting world. The women who continue to show us all what it means to be followers of Jesus. I have been very fortunate to be in the company of incredible colleagues, incredible female colleagues. It is a joy to walk with them as we continue to serve and to walk for equality for all people. On Monday, there was a flood of remembrances and hashtag thank you pastor on social media as the church celebrated these 50 years of women serving as ministers of word and sacrament, as pastors. There is much to celebrate, and there is much work to be done yet. I hope you take a moment to watch the 2 videos that I will link in the description. And you can also hop over to the ELCA YouTube channel and watch Bishop Eaton's video about the 50th anniversary. And while you're there, look up the video of the procession of female pastors during the Churchwide Assembly's worship of celebration. It is a sight to see. And you may see a brightly red-headed pastor dancing her way down an aisle in great abundant joy. That was me. I also hope if there has been a female pastor who has made a difference in your life, that you take time this week to thank her and include her in your prayers this week, and really in any week. This week we celebrate God's work through women of our church who have heard the call to pastoral ministry and have answered it with a yes.